Death and the ultimate identity, the true condition of human life. Are you ready for death right now? Could you handle it? Can you handle the death of the other? No one could be said to be in a position to enjoy that, but there is a profundity that absolutely transcends it, absolutely perfectly, and is untouched by anything at all, regardless of what happens to the body-mind, regardless of its fate and the fate of its relations. Introduction. As human beings, we generally have two strategies relative to death. Either we want to remain ignorant of it, or else we are hopeful about what will occur afterwards. Needless to say, neither of these approaches actually helps us to understand death as a process or to prepare for it. Neither attitude examines concrete evidence about what death entails or the reality that death implies. We spend a lifetime avoiding serious investigation of what we know to be inevitable. The first section of Easy Death gives us an orientation to Avatar Adidar's great wisdom about the apparent problem of death. Avatar Adidar points out that we fear death because it implies the end of self-identity. We might feel consoled by the reports of those who have had near-death experiences because they imply that personal identity may continue beyond death. But most who have died have not been resuscitated. They do not tell stories of their experience. They are, for all intents and purposes, gone. From a very early age, Adidar Samraj suffered through and observed the separation implied by death, and found that separation to be false. He saw that the despair of loss and separation was actually being superimposed on the bright divine reality that he had known from birth. Death does not change fundamental reality. As he says in the prologue of this book, which was also the first written teaching that Avatar Adidar ever offered to the world, death is utterly acceptable to consciousness and life. Avatar Adidar's revelation is that the ultimate identity of every apparently mortal being is the divine reality itself, untouched by birth or by death. Such an identity is not what we normally conceive to be self. It is that reality which is always already the case. It is the true personhood of everyone who happens to be born or to die. But there is no person there. Death is utterly acceptable because death is not the end of life itself as a process, nor of anything that is true or real. He says, if you observe only the mechanics of the fleshiness of beings, it is very easy to believe that death is the final event. But if you are possessed of the true vision of the infinite and eternal circumstance in which you live, and if you are able to be sensitive to the totality of your living, not just the fleshy part, then you already know very well that death is just a moment in the totality of indivisible light. In this section, Adidar Samraj also explains what he means by the title of this book. If death is to be easy, it must be linked with the divine reality. If we are clinging to the position of separation and identification with the body-mind persona, we are bound to our own mortality. But if we live rightly oriented to the great process in which we appear and disappear, actually practicing the relinquishment of the self-activity while yet alive, we are best prepared to die. Avatar Adidar does not merely offer a philosophical reorientation to death. He offers a living relationship with the divine reality in person. This relationship with him transcends life and death. The story of Avatar Adidar's devotee that concludes part 1 beautifully demonstrates the transformation and grace that is available to all as a gift from Avatar Adidar Samraj, to live and die in direct and blissful communion with the bright living truth. The lesson of Bootsie's passing. Bootsie was Adidar's young dog, while being a child. So when he was 5 or 6 years old, Avatar Adidar had a vivid dream. I saw a neat green grass field moving up and away from me, and there was a beautiful full oak tree at its highest point on the horizon. It was a clear blue day. I did not see myself in the dream, but felt as if I were stationed at my point of view at the base of the rise. There were 3 women in black gowns, like nuns, walking away from me up the hill, and I felt this tremendous loss and separation, as if I were being left behind. I woke up crying with an intense fear of death, and I asked my mother about death. She tried to console me with assurances about God and the afterlife. But a fear was planted in me from that time, so that death was always thereafter a fascinating mystery to me. The contemplation of death as an apparent dilemma was a new experience for Avatar Adidar. Born in a state of utterly unqualified freedom and bliss, which he named the Bright, he had, at an early age, consciously relinquished this state in order to learn how to unlock the suffering of those he saw around him. As Avatar Adidar first experienced the problem of death, he felt death and the inevitable suffering of it as a counter to the bright condition of reality, calling it the source of contradiction, fear, mystery, and despair. Further reflection on his dream brought Avatar Adidar to identify what he felt to be the most significant question about death. What is the nature of the living consciousness associated with the mortal body-mind? He says, I often thought about that dream. I felt it was not a dream at all, but a memory of past death, or an intuition of future death. And the importance of that dream, or of death itself, was never the fact itself. For this reason, I never became particularly motivated to investigate spiritualistic psychism, which pursues the link between living beings and those who are outside this life. For me, the interest in death has always been a matter of investigating or deeply considering the present relationship between life consciousness and death. I have not truly been concerned with where one goes after death. In my very earliest years, it was always clear to me that no matter where one goes or where one is always the same fundamental consciousness. Indeed, I observed and experienced all events from the point of view of the bright. I was being that radiant consciousness which is untouched. But I gradually became combined with the mortal experience of identification with the body-mind, and a great question arose in me, more and more persistently and profoundly. What is consciousness in its living form and altogether? What must occur within it for it to remain as it is, untouched and free and blissful, even while, in its living form, it already bears the certainty or the tacit knowledge of death? Even as Avatar Adidar pondered these profound questions, he gradually adapted to ordinary life with his parents, including life in the Lutheran Christian Church to which they brought him. The Divine Heart Master's first childhood experience of death was with his beloved Cocker Spaniel, Bootsie, whose passing, when Avatar Adidar was about 9 years old, was the circumstance of an early great lesson about the fundamental nature of consciousness. Adidar says, "One day I went into the cellar while my father was at work and my mother away shopping. As I walked into the room, I saw Bootsie lying in an old, overstuffed chair in the corner of the cellar. I called her and rushed over to pet her, and she was dead. I do not think I had ever touched a dead one before, and certainly not one that I had loved and known alive. She was stiff, lying as if in sleep, and her warmth was nearly gone. I was immediately overcome by terrible grief. I ran upstairs and sat enrolled in my room and wept for what seemed like hours. But there was not only grief, there was also fear and guilt. I was stuck with some kind of knowledge that I was afraid to tell. My door was closed, and I heard my mother in the other rooms. She must have heard me crying, but I do not think she came in to me. She must have gone and found the dead animal and decided to leave me to my father. Then he too came home, and they opened the door to me. My father asked me what was wrong, and I was trying not to show my grief. But then I told him, Bootsie died, and I fell in his arms and wept. After several hours of consolation and quiet, I had controlled my grief. Then I made a very strange decision. I could not bear an estrangement from love. I prayed to God to receive Bootsie and care for her. And then I told him that I wanted him to take me also. I needed time to make the transition from my life and love in the world, and so I told him it should be at 9 p.m. 2 days from then, I believe on a Sunday. I did not tell my parents I was about to die. I decided to be with them and enjoy with them for 2 days and make an easy transition. On the last day we drove to the country. I watched in the clouds, seeing only heaven and Bootsie and God. Then it was the evening of my death. We had dinner and sat in the living room watching television. I went and prayed to God, and I was certain he would take me at 9 o'clock. But as the hour approached, I began to realize the importance of this move. I was about to leave life. I was about to suffer the loss of the world, my parents, my future possibility. I felt a tremendous connection to the living world and saw that the absence of one I loved did not amount to the destruction of love, of living consciousness, of life energy, of bright fullness, or of heart joy. I saw that I was alive. Nevertheless, I presumed that much of this conversion might be due to fear and regret. I knew that I had bargained with God, and therefore I would not abandon his will. And so I only sat and waited. I watched the television and continually relaxed the awesome fear that kept rising in me. 9 o'clock came, and I did not die. I do not remember if I was alone in my room or with my parents at that hour. But when it passed, I went and prayed to God. I thanked him for my life and asked forgiveness for my wavering. But something in me had died or become hidden in that hour. I remember that for several years afterward, I would end my prayers with the request, "And please, dear Lord, allow me to live until I am 89 years old or older." This incident awakened in Avatar Adidar a clear understanding of human seeking and the common presumptions relative to death as well as life. Adidar says, "Whenever I have turned from the true center of present time life consciousness to one or another kind of seeking motivated in the desires of my complex life, I have been brought to the same recognition. The search is suffering. When, for example, I felt the loss of the little animal I loved, I was moved to find her, to be where that love continued as is. So I was motivated to a drastic ascent from life, to what, because of my separated mentality, seemed to be God. But at last, I saw that the motive toward reunion was itself a source and act of separation, and that it was itself a destructive cutting away of free awareness, of love bliss energy, and of life. In the hours of waiting for death, I was not awake as the bright, the full presence of my being. I was separate from the bright and saw all love and light and freedom of being as utterly above, apart from me and this world. Only too late, it seemed to me then, did the shock of what I awaited draw me into that fullness again. And I saw that reality was always already and therefore always presently full, and that to seek that fullness in the symbolic state I was awaiting was to abandon or to not presume and enjoy that always present fullness in the actual present moment. I learned, or even relearned, this great lesson at that time. It is not merely the product of reflection years hence. Originally, but decreasingly, as a small boy, I operated with that clarity and enjoyed, even in my living form and consciousness, the knowledge of real or ultimate or truly divine consciousness. The search itself has never been my fundamental vocation. The search was only a curious excursion. It was temporarily necessary because of my born association with the functions and tendencies of a living human body-mind. But because of the always underlying foundation that is the bright, it was also only a means of reaffirmation of the real in the context of my living consciousness. Therefore, all of my life, reality itself, spiritually bright and full, has been the fundamental circumstance of my living existence. Da. Avatar Adidar's confession demonstrates that the process of awakening beyond the mortal vision is one of recognizing the prior truth of reality, not of seeking or attaining a different state. The bright was, even from the beginning, the context of Avatar Adidar's appearance, awakening, and communication to all. Da.